Hello, I'm Tony Horgan. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make some beats with the Korg Volca Drum. All these beats are in my book, Korg Volca Drum, The Expert Guide by Tony Horgan. I'll give you a quick preview of those beats and then we'll get into them in a lot more detail in the rest of the video. This is a reggaeton beat, which is actually used in quite a wide range of different styles and pop music at the moment. I'm sure you'll recognise it. It sounds like this, and it looks like this. So most of this beat is quite simple. The bass drum is just playing on the black steps here, as you would expect, 1, 5, 9 and 13. And the shaker, or a closed hi-hat, is playing on alternate steps. I've just put an extra one in on step 10 for a bit of variety. But it's the snare drum that's doing the work here. So the snare drum plays on step 4, just before the kick drum on step 5, and then on step 12 before the kick drum on step 13. And this is really a repeating pattern of 8 steps, really. So it's that snare drum on step 4, and then when it's repeated, snare drum on step 12. It gives it that feel. So it's playing here. So this is the one that plays just before the kick, and then this one is kind of like a reward to bring you back to where you should be. So just to kind of let you know that where the rhythm is going. So because rhythms don't need to be too challenging, they do need to have an element of predictability and kind of safety to them, so that people feel at ease to groove along to them. So here's your sort of your challenging one that defines the beat, and then this is one that says, yeah, it's okay, look, we're just back here. So because this one is equidistant from the kick drum, which is playing here, you see. So the kick drum is playing here. So we've got one snare there and then one snare there. This is the predictable snare, this one and this one. And this is the unpredictable one that gives it its kind of vibe. So I've got a very basic variation that you can try. You could do loads of stuff over the top of that. But here's a very basic one you can do just to put an open hi-hat on the kick drum steps. Normally, putting an open hi-hat on the kick drum steps would sound quite maybe childish. I'm not sure if that's quite the right word, but maybe a bit too predictable. But it works quite well with this pattern. So if we find an open hi-hat in my kit, so I've got one here, and I'm going to put that onto these steps, which are the same steps as the kick drum, and it will sound like this. If I remove them, you can hear it as it was, and then I'll put them back again. And that is pretty much that beat. It's played at a low tempo. I've set 100 BPM, so you can go anywhere plus or minus, I would say about 10 BPM from there, and still keep the same vibe. And it has a swing setting of 0. It doesn't really need the swing, especially as most of those notes are actually being played on the odd numbers, and the swing only affects the even numbered steps. I will play a little bit of music along with that from the Volca FM, and we'll hear how that sounds, and we'll move on to the next beat. I call this one house/techno/EDM, electronic dance music. It's a very simple, rock solid, very easy to dance to beat, and you can put lots of stuff over the top of it. So it sounds like this, and it looks like this. As you can see, it's very simple. So it's the kind of beat that people might refer to as a 4 on the floor, or might refer to as a 4/4 beat. Although, of course, 4/4 is a time signature and doesn't have to sound like this. But what people will be referring to is the bass drum being on every fourth step, 1, 5, 9, 13, and then all the other sounds being placed on subdivisions, really, kind of equal divisions of those 16 steps, all except for that snare drum down there that I've just put in as a little bonus. So we've got open hi-hats going in between the kick drum, and I've got closed hi-hats on every step. You could take off the closed hi-hat from the steps where the open hi-hats are, but I like to keep them there because it means you can mute the open hi-hats and you still get a good solid closed hi-hat pattern playing. And then we've got a clap sound playing on every other kick drum, so on 5 and 12, so it's boom chick, like that. And then I've put a snare just down there at the end, just as a tiny little fill. You can use this with lots of other stuff. You can add a lot of other sounds. So within this kit, this on the Volca drum, this leaves us one sound. So I've chosen a rim shot sound to go with that, and I'm going to sprinkle the rim shot around. The rim shot is also going through via the send to the waveguide effect, so it's getting a kind of delay type effect. And I'm going to play around. So I'll play around with the snare drum and the rim shot, and I will maybe mute a few things, and then I'm going to add a few bits from the mini log. The mini log's going to do some accompaniment, and I'm using a preset pack which is free from the Korg website, which is called the Deep Dive. So the sounds that you're hearing from the mini log are from the Deep Dive mini log preset download pack. Anyway, let's start making a bit more noise and have a bit of fun. So I can add some rim shots. few more snares. Now we can add some stuff from the mini log. Funky Congas. This one uses 3 conga sounds. And it sounds like this. So this is a fairly simple beat in terms of the bass drum and the clap. They keep a nice metronome kind of rhythm. But what happens with the congas is they make it quite funky because they sit between the kick drum steps. They don't play over the top of the kick drum steps. And there's a mix of high and low and a middle conga. So they play in an order from the high conga at the start of the pattern towards the middle. There's the middle conga, and then at the end of the pattern there are the low congas. I've indicated a downward arrow for the low conga, a horizontal arrow for the middle conga, and a vertical upward arrow for the high congas. Those are tuned to different notes. It doesn't give us many different parts left that we can use for the rest of the pattern, but it's good enough to get something nice and funky and groovy going. And you can always add drum sounds from another drum machine or from elsewhere. So the vocal drum doesn't have to be the only drum track or drum machine in your track. There's also a bit of extra funk that comes from the swing setting there, swing setting of 14. And we have a basic shaker. So I'll just play that again. I call this one rock/synth pop because it's a kind of pattern that's used in a lot of rock and synth pop. You can use it for various different styles. It sounds like this, and it looks like this. In this pattern that I'm playing you now, in this example, I'm using the A1 kick patch, and I think I'm using the A1 snare short patch from my book, even though in the visual here I'm suggesting acoustic kick drum emulation and A1 snare and razor hat closed. These patches are all references to patches that are in my book, and I just thought I'd show you this. It just turned up today, the first copy of Korg Volca Drum, the Expert Guide in print. So in this book there's a chapter of patches, a few chapters of patches all in groups. So all of those sounds that I'm mentioning in the visuals are here. So you can mix and match those patches within the patterns, of course, as you wish. I'm not necessarily going to show you all of the sounds and the patches as they are in the visuals. I'm just going to go with what I've got right now. So that is that pattern. I'll show you a quick variation of that. Oh, by the way, this is available from lulu.com, and the ebooks are available from Google Play Books and Apple Books. So a couple of variations. One variation you can do is to remove the kick drum. So the kick drum there on step 11 could be removed from the first bar, and then you could make a copy of that with the kick drum back on step 11. So that would sound like this. I'll just do it manually, but you could do it by copying this into another pattern and doing a pattern chain. So it would sound like this. Another variation you could do would be to put something like an open hi-hat on step 15, just to give it a bit of a psh at the end of the bar. So I'm going to find something like an open hi-hat in this kit. That will do. I think I'll make that a bit longer. And then I'll put that on step 15. It was already there, wasn't it? So this is without it. And then this is the pattern with it in there. And as it's a synth pop type of thing, I'll play you something from the Volca FM that sounds kind of synth poppy. This one is called 6/8 Shuffle. It's a reference to the time signature that you can make when you change the active step settings. So it's a low tempo. it has a swing setting of 0. It looks like this. Sounds like this. If you're paying attention, you will notice that there was a little hand clap fill towards the end of that, which I haven't included on that visual there. So that's something you can add. So the way we do this is to use the active step setting to reduce the pattern from 16 steps, in this case down to 12 steps. And we're doing it just by removing the last 4 steps of the pattern so that it plays through from step 1 to step 12 and then returns to step 1. In many of the Volcas, the active step setting is something that you make across the board for the entire pattern. There's one active step setting for the pattern. But in the Volca Drum, you can set a different active step setting for each part. And it's important to remember that you need to do that for each part. Otherwise, some parts will be playing a 16-step loop and others will be playing a loop, in this case, up to 12 steps and back again. So, if we have a look at the bass drum, I've selected a bass drum here. So instead of it going on the black notes, 1, 5, 9, it hits 1 step earlier. So if we look at the active step setting for that part, we can see I've already taken off the last 4 steps. And if I select the next sound, a kind of shaker or closed hi-hat sound, and select active step, the same there. And it's the same for all the others. So the way this works is that we have a bass drum here, and then we have 3 steps where we have the bass drum, and then we have 2 steps, and then we have another bass drum. So this is how it sounds again. So it's not a very common style of rhythm in dance music or in pop music, but you will find examples of this kind of rhythm. For example, if we go way back to Michael Jackson's song "The Way You Make Me Feel," and if we come up in time slightly up to the kind of mid-90s, Hard Floor did a track called "The Last Marshmallow Machine." So you could look up "The Last Marshmallow Machine" by Hard Floor and "The Way You Make Me Feel" by Michael Jackson, the 2 examples of this kind of timing groove. I've added a couple of fills at the end of it. I call this one London Soul because it's based on the kind of grooves that were made popular by the South London collective Soul to Soul in the late 80s and early 90s, and then used on quite a wide variety of different dance tracks. So you'll probably recognize it from various different tracks. It sounds like this. you'll see that it's really a very simple beat at its core. So it's got a bass drum, and it's got a snare, and it's got a shaker pattern. Most of the work here is being done by the snare and the kick, or the bass drum. So the snare is playing on steps 5 and 13, so nothing unusual at all there. That's really just keeping a rhythm. But you've got the kick going on 1, 4, 7 and 11. And it's that interplay between the kick on those slightly irregular steps and the regular snare that gives it that kind of sound. The shaker is really doing the job of a kind of a metronome, but it's using the swing setting. So the swing setting is at 20. So that gives it a bit of a shuffly swing. So if I turn the swing setting down, then you'll notice the difference. It sounds much more rigid. So if let's come into the Volca drum here. If I turn the swing setting down now, so now it's at 0, you can hear it's much more regimented. And once we turn the swing setting up, we're going to put it up to 20, then you get that kind of funky feel to it. So I've got some variations we can use with this. There are loads of things you can do. You could put loads of stuff over the top of it, and it would still get that kind of vibe, but feel a lot fuller. I'm going to show you something very simple, first of all, just with one snare drum. So if we come down to the variations panel here, I'm going to look at the snare drum sort of towards the bottom of your picture there on step 10. So I'm going to add that. So if I find, and also I'm going to do that with a probability value of 30. Okay, so if I find the snare drum in my kit, so my snare drum is on sound or part number 4. If I press the edit step button, that shows me where it is in the pattern at the moment. So I'm going to add another one on step 10, but I'm going to change the probability value of it so that it doesn't always play at the same time. If I leave it like this, it will always play, which is nice. But it kind of feels like it's a fill, that it shouldn't be there all the time. It should be a little bonus thing, maybe at the end of a bar, or maybe just coming in now and then. So what we can do is, rather than making different patterns and just adding that one in a duplicate, we can use the probability factor or the probability feature to make this just that one step 10 with the snare drum play every now and then. So if I hold this key, number 10, while the snare drum is selected, and then turn the value knob, or the level value knob, then it's going to change the probability factor here. When the probability is at 100, it will always play, so that's the default setting. When the probability setting is at 0, it will never play, and it's out of the pattern, it's not there anymore. When I turn it up to, let's say I turned it up to 50, there would be a 50% chance that it would play when the sequencer runs through that step. So because this is it's a probability factor, it doesn't mean that it's going to play every other time, or every third time, or every fifth time, or most, so it's like the dice is rolled each time the sequencer plays through, and there's a probability factor of that sound playing. So I'm going to turn it down to 30, and then it might go it could go through 10 times and never play that sound, or it could go through 5 times and play that sound every time. It just kind of depends on the random roll of the dice. If you like a 100-sided dice, and if it comes up with a number between 1 and 30, then it's going to play that sound because the probability setting is at 30. Okay, so that's probability. The other variation I'm going to show you is with an open hi-hat. I'm going to put that on step 8. Let me find an open hi-hat in this kit. So I've got an open hi-hat. I'm going to put that on step 8. Am I? Yes, I'm going to put it on step 8 there. We could also use the choke feature with the open hat and the closed hi-hat to make that open hi-hat cut off as soon as step 9 is reached, where the closed hi-hat is. So if we were to hold funk and press choke, and then we select, we need to remember which sounds, 5 and 2. So we hold funk and we press choke, and then we select 5 and 2. That means that only one of those sounds, 5 and 2, is going to play at the same time. So when one of them plays, if one of them is playing and then the other one is triggered, that will stop the other one playing. Now, that means we need to take off the closed hi-hat from step 8. So now we've got a much different sound where the open hi-hat plays and then is immediately cut off on step 9, which is quite a nice clipped kind of sound. R&B Superstar. This one uses 2 kick drums in the same kit. They're 2 kick drums that I've included in the book, and I call them A1 kick and A1 kick long. This allows us to make a kind of a hybrid kick pattern and a bass line at the same time. It sounds like this and looks like this. So let's have a quick look at those bass drums first. We've got the bass drum that I call A1 kick long here. One reason I call it A1 kick long is because it's tuned to the note A1, and another reason is because it's a long kick. It has a long release phase. And then I have another version of it here, which is based on the regular A1 kick sound, but I've tuned it down from A1 down to E1. So in case you can't hear that on your system, the tunings are so that allows us to make this kind of bass line and beat at the same time. So let's just have a quick look at the pattern here. On the visual, you can see it's at a low tempo, 93 BPM. It has a swing setting of 0, so it's all being played quite straight. You can see in the first track we've got the long kick, and then in the second track, in the gaps, we've got the shorter kick at the different pitch. And I've used the choke setting to avoid the kicks overlapping each other. So if one is playing when the other is triggered, the sound that was playing previously will be cut out by the new sound. So you can see on steps 1, 7, and 14, we've got the long kicks there, there, and there, and then we've got the shorter ones in between. Then looking down, we've got the rim shot track, which is playing on every step, and then we've got the clap, which is basically anchoring the beat on 5 and 13. Now you could change the rim shot for something, if you wanted this pattern to sound maybe a bit less distinctive and a bit more typical, you could change that rim shot sound for something like an open hi-hat just by changing from the sine wave to one of the noise waves. We could try that just now on the fly. Then I could just bring it back to the original rim shot sound by reloading that kit. So now we're back there. Now, there's also the slice feature being used on there. So if we have a look down here, use slice for triplets, it says here. So on steps 1, 7 and 10, I've used the slice feature on that rim shot sound. So that means that as I've got it set up here, on steps 1, 7 and 10, it will play that rim shot sound 3 times over the course of that step. And that can go up to a higher value, or we can just put it back to 1. I'll show you how that works quickly now. So if we press, we'll select the rim shot. So we've got the other sounds here. So now we have the rim shot selected. If I press edit step and then slice, it now says edit slice here. So if I hold this button, this step, and then turn the level value knob, then it will change the slice setting here. So if I changed it to 16, it would sound like this on the first step. Okay, and very quickly, I'll just put a little bit of music over that, and then we'll move on to the next one. This one is called Easy Rap Backing. It's quite simple. and it sounds like this. You're probably thinking that sounds really boring. Yeah, maybe you're right. It's quite simple, but it's quite useful, and it's easy to put stuff over the top. So, the beats don't always have to be the star of the show. If you try it, you'll find that it is very easy to put stuff over the top. There are two things we've done to take this out of just a very basic repeating 4/4 kind of loop. One is that we've moved the bass drum from step 9. Well, we've completely removed it from step 9. So there's a bass drum on 1, 5, and 13, and not on 9. So that frees up a bit of space in the middle of the pattern that you could use for some other kind of bass sound if you want, or you can just leave it there to give the bass drum a little bit of contrast and kind of light and shade. The other simple thing that we've done is with the open hi-hat. Instead of the open hi-hat sounding on step 3, as you might expect in a very simple repeating 4/4 type pattern, we've moved the open hi-hat, the first open hi-hat, to step 4. And we've filled in that step 3 with a closed hi-hat. So we still have a constant open and closed hi-hat pattern. But we've just moved that first open hi-hat one step later. And then we have a snare drum on step 5 and 13. So you could use a snare drum like I have there, or you could use a hand clap. You can experiment with different sounds there. So that's the kind of thing that's going to give the beat its flavour. A lot of the flavour of this beat is going to come from the sounds that you choose. So if we tweak the sounds, for example, you'll get the idea. There's also a fill that I've suggested that you could put in, which is, well, not a fill, but a variation that I've suggested here, using a shaker or some other kind of noise or white noise sound that goes on every step and uses an accent on every other step to give it a bit of a groove, and then increasing the swing from 0 up to 20. So if I do that now, we'll see how that changes the feel of the beat. It can change the feel of the beat and make it feel a little bit more urgent or a little bit more skippy without actually changing the tempo. So the tempo is still going to be the same. Okay, this one is called Hard and Fast because it's hard and it's fast. in this demo, I've gone a little bit rogue and made most of my own sounds just right now, rather than go back and check that I've got all the same sounds that I've said in the visual. But the one sound that I have got the same is the Techno double kick, which is this sound. That sound has two elements to it. It has the first kind of kick, and then it has a kind of almost like an echo or some sort of a reverberation effect that comes back. That's using two layers, one layer to do the first bit and another layer to do the second bit. With the other sounds, I've gone a little bit off-piste, like I say, and made up my own variations. But the idea is the same. So we've got a high tempo. We've got 150 BPM. We've got the bass drum going on those regular steps there, 1, 5, 9, and 13. Then we've got an open and closed hi-hat pattern going. It's quite simple. It's a little bit more sparse than you might have in some of these kind of beats. You can see the open hi-hats are alternating with the kick drum, and then the closed hi-hat is going on the steps with the kick drum, with another one just after the first kick drum. And then we've got a clap and a snare, which are sounding on the second and fourth bass drum steps. You could just use one clap on 5 and 13, or one snare on 5 and 13. But it's nice to change that sound from one sound to another within the same loop. So this is great for hard, fast, techno, excitable kind of stuff. So for this one, I'll demonstrate it with a simple pattern from the Korg Monologue, which is great for these kind of techno-y, acid, trance type sounds. So here we go. UK Garage. This one is quite a sparse beat. It's 132 BPM, so the tempo's fairly high. And it just uses two kick drums. Uses one on the first step, step 1, and uses another one on step 8. And then So we get this kind of two-step kind of feel. And then we have the open hi-hats playing on 3, 7, 11 and 15, nice and evenly. And those kind of offset the kick drum, which is slightly more unusual kind of rhythm. So when we, apart from the kick drum, when we look at the other sounds in that beat, everything else is quite regular. You've got the open hi-hats, you've got the clap and the snare, and then the only kind of irregular bits we've got, apart from the kick drum, are those closed hi-hats. You have a closed hi-hat playing on step 6 here, and we have another closed hi-hat playing on step 12. So the closed hi-hats and the kick drum are what gives this beat its kind of slightly jittery kind of feel, combined with the swing setting of 26. The swing setting only affects the sounds that are on even numbered steps in a pattern. So that's affecting the kick drum on step 8 and those 2 closed hi-hats, but everything else is not receiving any swing, because the swing, that's how the swing works. Okay, so without going into too much detail about how that works, it delays the timing of the even numbered steps. So here it is again, and then I'll put some bass over it like this, and I've got some keys from the Volca keys that I can play over it. So let's try that. Acid hip hop. This one is based on the drum beat used in Higher State of Consciousness by Josh Wink. It's a kind of medium tempo. It's at 115 BPM, so not as slow as you might go for a lot of R&B, rap, or indeed hip-hop kind of stuff. But then it's not up into the kind of 120, 130 BPM tempos that you might associate with house, techno, trance, garage, that kind of thing. So it's kind of somewhere in between. It uses a funny kind of kick drum pattern where the kick drum plays on 1, 8 and 10, and then most of the rest of it is fairly standard. We've got a snare drum on 5 and 13. We've got a repeating closed hi-hat pattern, and then we've got the open hi-hat on step 14, and that plays just between those 2 closed hi-hats on 13 and 15. And they have the choke feature set, both of those open and closed hi-hats. So when the open hi-hat plays, we can play it with a nice long release setting, so a nice long ch, and then the closed hi-hat will close it off straight away as that plays. we can have a lot of fun by moving the bass drum around in this pattern. So I'm going to play this with a bit of accompaniment from the monologue and the Volca FM, and then we can move the bass drum around according to these variations that I've got here. So we can switch it to these steps, and you'll hear how it changes the feel of the pattern quite a lot. So I'll just do that on the fly as we go. So we can change the kick drum to 1, 7 and 10. Or we could go 1, 3, 8 and 11. Or 1, 4 and 11. Or 1, 3, 6, 8 and 11. So you can kind of put the kick drum anywhere really in this pattern. So let's try that, and we'll mess around with some sounds as well.